Harvard Divinity School.
The Science and Philosophy of Plant Intelligence, February 16th, 2024.
Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I understand we have close to 60 people online and many people here in the room with us today. We're so excited that you've taken the time to join us for this talk with Luis Eduardo Luna, Thinking with Plants in the Peruvian Amazon and the Brazilian Atlantic Coastal Forests. My name is Rachel Peterson, and together with my colleague Natalia Schween, I co-lead the Plant Consciousness Reading Group here at the Center for the Study of World Religions. And the reading group is in our second year, and we are pleased to announce that we have blossomed into a full-blown initiative thanks to generous support from the V.K. Rasmussen Foundation. And this initiative will bring in the coming year additional programming around plants and fungi, a continuation of our reading group, and an interdisciplinary conference next spring in 2025. So stay tuned for all that we have in store for you on this subject. This initiative, Thinking with Plants and Fungi, is an interdisciplinary exploration into how plants help us rethink the nature of mind and matter and humans' relationship to the more than human world. How, in turning our attention to plants, might we cultivate an ecological imagination that displaces humans from its center? And how do different cultural, theological, and philosophical systems, both new and old, accommodate for the vibrancy and agency of plant life? Cutting-edge scientific research is shedding light on the sophisticated ways that plants and fungi sense, make sense of, and interact with the world. Recent scholarship has made mainstream notions that mere years ago were preposterous in the academy, namely that plants and fungi communicate, cooperate, and behave in ways previously unimaginable. Some argue that plants are even intelligent or conscious. This research in many cases resonates with ancient wisdom that has been safeguarded by indigenous spiritual and folk traditions throughout the world, as well as often forgotten ecological strains of thought within major philosophical and religious traditions. Indeed, the study of plants invites a redefinition of critical categories once indexed exclusively to humans, including mind, intelligence, sentience, consciousness, and agency. For that reason, scholars from across fields have taken up plants in an ongoing effort to challenge the anthropocentric focus of academic inquiry, a movement that has been termed the vegetal turn, which we are very happy to be part of. Some of you may be wondering why a divinity school? Why is this initiative housed at a divinity school? Well, the questions provoked by the so-called vegetal turn lie at the heart of the study and practice of religion. Namely, what is the relationship between mind and matter, spirit and flesh? How does this relationship change our understanding of what it means to be human? How do we regard the lives of beings very different from us? And importantly, what do we owe one another? We are so lucky today to have Luis Eduardo Luna, who will reflect with us on how the indigenous communities with which he has worked for many years answer these questions and more by learning from plants. So with that, I will pass things off to my colleague Natalia, who will introduce Luis Eduardo, and then we will leave time for Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Rachel, for introducing the initiative. We're so excited. So we are joined today by Dr. Luis Eduardo Luna. Dr. Luna is the Director of Wasiwaska, a Brazilian research center specializing in interdisciplinary research on plants, consciousness, visionary art, and indigenous spirituality. He is a Guggenheim Fellow and a Fellow of the Linnaean Society of London. Dr. Luna has been working with indigenous Amazonian communities for over 45 years and has written extensively about the Shipibo Canibo in Peru and related ayahuasca traditions, notably his books Ayahuasca Visions, The Religious Iconography of a Peruvian Shaman, and Vegetalismo, Shamanism among the Mestizo population of the Peruvian Amazon. His expansive and interdisciplinary work incorporates approaches from anthropology, religious studies, philosophy, and the visionary arts. He originally hails from Florencia in the Colombian Amazonian region. Today's talk with Dr. Luna is titled The Science and Philosophy of Plant Intelligence, and we welcome him and thank him for his time and his gracious sharing of his work. Thank you, Dr. Luna, and again, please hold your questions till after the talk. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I was born in the Colombian Amazon, and I think that, let me see, I met this man, Don Apolinar Yacanamijoy, since I was a child. But I never put much attention. I left for Spain in 1965, and in 71, I went back to Colombia to see my parents, and in a bar, I met Terence McKenna. Many of you know him. And he was 25, I was 24. We spent 2 months together. And then from time to time, I went to the Florencia, my town, to the pension where Apolinar used to go. With Terence and I took yaje, together, alone, without the shaman. And then I became very interested, went to see Apolinar and said, Don Apolinar, I want to learn with you. He said, well, if you want to learn, you have to come with me, take yaje 40 nights, and then at the end, yaje will come. I said, how he looks like. He's a little man. He's simpatico. Okay. So in 73, I spent 2 months in Berkeley with Terence reading the literature about psychedelic plants or in different indigenous communities. But I went back to Colombia only in 78, and this was the photo taken after I took yaje for the second time. But it was such a change for me because I discovered Amerindian epistemology, another way of looking at things. Animism, in fact, So I plan to make a film about him, look at the feet. Don Apolinar and his wife never wear shoes, and then his children, Don Roberto, had sandals, and the grandchildren tennis shoes. So I thought, I'm going to make a film. But he died before I was able to go back. By the way, I'm still in touch. This is Roberto and his wife Natalia, the children of Apolinar. And this girl who is having a child is Guaira Nina, who is now a very important leader in Colombia. And working in Canada, I had never seen this. She just sent me this photo today. I'm going to see her in Bogota in a few days. But anyway, apparently she's working, combining indigenous knowledge with art and poetry. And so it's a pleasure to see that after so many years, she's carrying the flag. And I'm part of a group in Exeter University, which we are working on decolonization issues. Okay, so in 1980, I went to Iquitos, and then with a Bolex camera, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make a film about this. And I met Don Emilio and spent 2 months with him, watching ceremonies, ritual healings, and preparing ayahuasca. And so I was very impressed with his knowledge, his humility, and I was watching people come in to have the sessions just to see, call it the jungle television, but sometimes it was for healing of different kinds. And he introduced me to other vegetalistas, which is the name that they call the ayahuasqueros. The vegetalismo is come from vegetal, and vegetal, it means plants that have power, that teach you, In fact, different practitioners. And then Don Emilio started to say, the plants know each other. They can heal you, they can harm you, and so on. So it was a completely different way of looking at plants. He said ayahuasca is a doctor, is a teacher, but so is tobacco, is toé, brunfelsia, caliandra. These are all teachers. And in fact, I started to many of these are used as an admixture plants to ayahuasca. Some of them are used completely separate. But anyway, I found that there were something like 70 admixture plants to ayahuasca. Later on, the number goes all the way to 200. And in fact, it is a way to learn from other plants. So in the Sibundoy Valley, they use any other plant, put it in the ayahuasca, so that they get in touch with the spirit of the plant, and the plant will tell them how to be used. So this plant, for instance, Curupita guinensis, is used for dreaming. They put the flower into a glass of water, and they take the water, and they said it induces dreaming. And of course, big trees, they have a strong spirit. You have to connect with them. You will never disrespect such a tree, defecating or urinating close to a tree, because it has big spirit. It can harm you. And in '86, I defended my doctoral dissertation at Stockholm University with this book, which was published later on in Czechish. And in 1984, I published The Concept of Plants as Teachers. Is an overlap here. Okay, and one of the persons that I met during this time was Dimitri Evthiboulos. He was a photographer, and he was photographing the forest, the reflection of the forest on the water. And then he said, you turn it 90 degrees, and then you see the spirits. He published a book with many of his photographs, and in fact, he died some years ago. Now we're in touch with they created a little foundation in Cyprus, where they are continue doing exhibitions with his work. And then in Colombia, I was in the Sibundoy Valley. I was with the Kamsa elders, and there I was doing a study about the plants around the gardens of the practitioners there, and Don Miguel Chindoy, he had a apprentice, a mestizo apprentice, and he's the one who told me this plants around here, this is the Jardín de la Ciencia, the garden of science. So again, Don Emilio was talking about plant teachers. Then in the Sibundoy Valley, we're talking about Jardín de la Ciencia. This is Don Salvador Chindoy, the father of Miguel Chindoy. So the idea is that they are communicating with the plants. They are the knowledge. These are our university. So I collected plants for Botanical Dimensions in Hawaii together with Dennis McKenna. And then he introduced me to this man, Pablo Amaringo. I visited him, and he was showing me some landscapes he had made on very cheap paper. And he told me that he had been an ayahuasquero years ago. He didn't take ayahuasca any longer. And then he said, I remember everything. And I thought, do you remember the visions that you had when you were taking ayahuasca? He said, yes, I do. So this was, he was at that time, this was some of the paintings they were doing on watercolor, cheap paper. But anyway, very beautiful. So he said, yes, I remember. And this is the very first vision. He gave one to Dennis, one to me. And then I went back to Helsinki, where I was living. And then I sent a photocopy and asking, what is this? What is this? And then came a big description. He sent me a big description about what was in that painting. And I was completely amazed, because there was, a detailed description with the names of the spirits and all that. So I realized, I'm used to talking to the shaman, they're telling you about the spirits, but here was a man who was telling me, they look like this, they are like this. So we started a communication, the same idea, these are the plant teachers. In Iquitos, they say that the trees have mothers or owners, las madres de los árboles. So we started a collaboration that lasted for many years, and each of these paintings has a big description, so no impossible to go through it. But anyways, here you have the feeling for the kind of material he was doing. And I organized exhibitions all over Europe, in Japan, in the States, in Mexico, other places, and gradually he became a quite famous painter. And we published together this book in 1991 with a description, footnotes, scientific names of the plants and scientific names of the plants and animals and so on, big index. And this is a painting that that he made for me. This is now in Quai Branly Museum in Paris, with 37 pages of descriptions of all this. So it's just amazing. It was and then once Pablo started to have, I managed to get money for him, all materials, the best materials I could get. And then one of the kids, the third one from the left, came and started to paint with cartoon. And so I asked Pablo, please give him materials, everything that, So he started to paint, and then another kid came, another one came, and so let's say, let's create a school of painting. So we created in 1988 the Usco Ayar Amazonian School of Painting, and it was such an incredible success. Poor kids from the neighborhood started to come, and soon we have no space, so we have to build some more, and then more, and it was just quite amazing. One of the things that I realized, Amazonians have eidetic memory, incredible eidetic memory. That's what Pablo has, He said, I remember anything I have seen, and he was able to put it on painting. The kids as well. So he said, you never copy directly from anything. You have to internalize it and project it on the paper. And so this is what the kids were doing. Many of the paintings I organize exhibitions as well, and put it in cover of books and so on. And collective paintings as well. This one is in the Children's Museum in Oslo, if you ever go there, Barnekunst Museum there. And so at some point we had 300 students. It was too much for me. It was free, the tuition was free, the materials were free, but I was just 7 years, just organizing exhibition, and it was too much. And then some conflicts started also, because money always creates, envies and this and that, gossip. And so anyway, in 1994, I said, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to leave you there. The school continues up and down. Now it disappeared. But what happens is, this is the beginning of the school. So this is some of the exhibitions I organized. This one, Landau. The last one, it was really a big success in Peru as well, calendars and so on. I wanted to create new schools, but at the end it was not possible. But anyway, we had some kids from the school in Leticia and then in Helsinki, and they were doing the paintings in front of everyone, the plants, especially the plants, of course. Some of the kids started to do ayahuasca visions as well. Pablo didn't like it so much, but anyway, here are some examples of it. And we had fantastic cases. Like this is a fisherman, Marcelino, who came with this, with cardboard, with this painting. And I saw this. I told Pablo, please don't teach him anything, just give him the materials. And he started to do extraordinary things. Unfortunately, he was killed. He was taking care of the chickens, and somebody came to steal the chickens and kill him, for that. But it's such a terrible, but beautiful paintings. And then this is a peasant who also heard about the school and started to do her visions as well. I mean, the incredible thing is that I had no idea before started to work with Pablo that all this was in the minds of these people. Amazonian people, you see, humble people, materially very poor, but you start to dig into their minds, and it's all this in there. So this is Anderson de Bernardi, one of the kids there, doing extraordinary paintings. He's now doing wonderful things, and he's doing both naturalistic paintings as well as visionary art as well. And we created an ethnobotanical garden close to the school. We have to close it because the guerrilla, the Sendero Luminoso, came to threaten us, asking for money. So we created a second garden in Iquitos, we sent 14 of the kids to do portraits of the plants, and it was the last exhibition I organized. It was in Washington, in the Children's Museum, or Capitol Children's Museum, in Washington, with portraits of plants. I introduced Pablo to a sculptor, Agustin Rivas, and then later on I was traveling in France, and there was a combination of the sculptures of Agustin Rivas and the paintings of Pablo Amaringo, beautiful things, So we started a whole movement of visionary art in the Amazon. I was very surprised. I got a message from Scott Olsen, who had organized an exhibition in Florida, and I also continue doing organizing exhibitions of visionary art in Valparaiso and in Canton, New York, and so on. These are some of the artists that I invited. So I became interested in visionary art. Rick Hallow from Boston, who is coming here tomorrow, and is working also with indigenous communities in Colombia. Roberto Venosa, he died, but he did extraordinary paintings, also related to his visions with ayahuasca. And so this is the Appleton Museum in Florida. Sorry, it's repeated, so this is this is the kind of thing that they are doing now. If you go to Iquitos or Pucallpa, you see everywhere this kind of art, So it started from that school that we created. And then I was surprised. There was a Swiss man who sent me some invitations to exhibitions. He has been now working with something like 20 of all the students, organizing big exhibitions, in Holland, in Romania, and Belgium, etc. So we created a whole movement, which didn't exist before. Okay. Some examples of the kind of art these kids are doing now. They are now in the 40s or the 50s now, the old students. And right now there is in the Musée Branly in Paris an exhibition of Amazonian visionary art, and there are several of the paintings from Pablo Amaringo and some of the students, plus Shipibo visionary art as well. By the way, I was with the Shipibo only 1 month, I was not in depth, so. All right. Okay. Now a little bit about the project that we have in Florianopolis. The Wasiwaska Research Center. It was started 25 years ago with very little money. But anyway, I was dreaming of a place where I could invite my friends and we could have interdisciplinary seminars. And this is in southern Brazil on the island of Santa Catarina. This place. Was practically deforested because the boats came from Europe, and some boats came from New York to San Francisco via San Florianopolis, because before the Panama Channel was built, it was all around through the Magallanes Strait. And so this area, all this is the Atlantic coastal forest. And some biologists said that the Atlantic coastal forest was even more diverse than the Amazon, richer even in biological diversity, because it went through many different latitudes. But it's only about 3 to 5% left, because most of the big cities in Brazil were built just around along the coast. Coffee plantations, sugar, cattle, all this has been destroyed. So what we are doing is trying to do a little bit. This is Florianopolis, the city, but we are in the northern part of the island. It's Waswasa there. We are close to a reserve. There's a Ratones River running there. And this is the place. We are now reforesting this area with plants from the Atlantic coastal forest. So this is the place now, and we have 3 hectares. I don't know how many acres will be, and then some friends bought this other area, and then another friend. So we are now taking care of 9 hectares, fighting with very invasive fern, with pines, which are very invasive, and so slowly reforestating. And our institution has a very interesting advisory board. We organize completely historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, biologists, cosmologists, inviting people, and we organize just 2 or 3 seminars per year. But now we are opening residence also for students. We have a resident for different countries. A very good place to, close to the ocean. You can swim. Just the only sound are birds, and good place to be. And the idea is to gather students and some sort of, brainstorming and helping each other writing the thesis and so on. Now the garden. In South Africa, I met Dale Millar, a naturalist, over 20 years ago, and I invited him to, we went together to the Sangoma Valley and met some of the Sangomas there in South Africa. There's my wife there to the right. We started the botanical garden there. These are our 2 main gardeners, Don Valdomiro and Don Jose. And every seminar, people are planting trees, And so we started from the very beginning with some seeds of Banisteriopsis capi and Psychoter viridis, and it's very nice to see from the scratch, When you see the seed, you see the whole, growing, you get this, and a completely different contact with plants, And so we did experiments like planting a fast-growing tree together with a vine, so growing vertically ayahuasca in great quantities, because ayahuasca is very invasive. It goes into other plants, but like this you can, and at the same time produce a lot of biomass, which means that you're restoring the soil and you can plant other trees in between and so on. So different varieties of ayahuasca. This is the so-called Tucunacá and Kaupuri. This is the name given to one of the churches, to the different kinds. Beautiful flowers. And the Diplopterus cabrerana, which is the one that you use together with Banisteriopsis capi to make yaje. That's what I took first, yaje and ayahuasca. The admixture plant is the difference. Caliandras, which are used as admixture plants, and so on. So we have Brugmansias, Daturas. This is Brugmansia aurea from the Sibundoy Valley, very rare and very beautiful. It flowers 6 times per year. It's just amazing, beautiful, incredible scent. Beautiful. Every flower is different, And so here you can compare the 2 Brugmansias, the Brugmansia suaveolens and Brugmansia aurea, very different, because this is some kind of mutation done by the Kamsa and Ingano Indians in the Sibundoy Valley, created these new varieties. And we have, of course, Hawaiian baby rose. You see the flowers, and this is the Oluluki from the Aztecs and so on. So we have now about over 400 species, including some of the sacred ones like Cavacava from Polynesia. And we have the Anadenantheras, both from the northern South America and the Caribbean and the South, very important in different cultures. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about some of these. And then discovering, these monkeys, they started to, they are gummivores, and they go for plants that contain DMT. We wonder whether they can get high, we don't know. And then we created PAS, and the idea, hopefully soon, we are going to have children, school children, to visit the garden and so on. So we are now making the steps and so on, so we don't want to have accidents. We have bees, and we produce a lot of the food we eat. Places where we take out this fern and pines, and we plant new trees. And we have a lot of bromelias and orchids and so on. Okay, so now we have the problem with, what I see with Western way of thinking is objectivity. That's our big problem, because that means that there's a separation between subject and object. And this is the human and the non-human, of course. And the human, both biotic and abiotic. And so Western culture and all other cultures. And very often is the male and the female, which is, and so on. So in this separation between culture and nature, and this is not happening in traditional societies where you have, culture and nature are one. You know, in fact, if everything is alive, if everything is intelligent, then there's no difference, you know, because the epistemological way of looking at things is subject through subject, you know. It's interrelational epistemology. So this is some thoughts, and I'm open for conversation. All right? How you wanna go?
Thank you so much, Luis Eduardo, for that rich, sweeping overview of your incredible career to date, especially the pictures, the paintings. I think for all of us were special to see. I want to start off by asking you to elaborate a little bit on vegetalismo. I was particularly drawn in by this quote, "Las plantas se conocen," plants know one another. And I have so many questions, I'll try to make it short. It sounds like there are some plants that teach and some plants that don't teach. I'm curious if I'm right in that characterization.
Okay.
And number one, in this cosmology, what is the account for why and how plants teach? And then how do those plants speak to one another? ¿Cómo se conocen, I guess would be the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, first, are all plants, I was asking, you know, this, okay, are all plants have mother, you know, owner? Some people say yes, if you know them well, yes. But some plants are especially powerful, like ayahuasca, toe, all this, you know, there are special plants that open the way to other plants, you know, because there is something that I realize, okay, ayahuasca is used in many different ways, but one of the ways is like the gate to understand other plants, you know, and it's just adding a little bit. It can be just putting some leaves or a little bit of bark into the brew, and then it opens the communication to other plants. So I think that is the most important. The other thing is, I was asking Dolomir, okay, what do you take plants? What is the what do you do with it? What is the meaning behind? He said to strengthen your body and to clarify your mind. And so, in a way, I understood that health and wisdom are the two sides of the same coin. You know, yes, I think that all plants have a spirit. You know, that's the idea. No? Not only plants, animals, lakes, rivers, mountains. You know, in the Andes is the Apus. You know, so the idea is that everything is intelligent, and we have to learn how to communicate with that. You know, with it. And of course, I mean, now that I have this botanical garden at home, what I do is try to communicate. You know, and of course, it is not a conceptual. You know, it is just simply putting your mind at peace. You know, I would say something that some people will not like, but I would say that because it's a joke. You know, in Brazil, you know, they said that what is the definition of ego? You know, it's the little Argentinian that is inside of us. So we have to try the rest, the Argentinian at peace, open to communication. And of course, the way to open the communication is watching, smelling, touching, you know, the plants with no concepts, you know, no apparatus, you know, chatting there, but just be there. And one of the things that we do we have benches in the garden, you know, so the people can just go there and sit and just be at peace with nature, with the plants. So it's I got to do all this gradually. You know, it took many years to really get it. You know, now of course I've been in communication with some anthropologists about animism, of course. Descola is talking about the subjectivity that is in everything, you know, and then that subjectivity is human, you know. And Eduardo de Castro said, okay, perspectivism, you know, so that the jaguar, for the jaguar, we are the jaguar, you know, for the jaguar is human, we are the prey, you know, and so on, this kind of, you know. And then I've been talking to other anthropologists, and I think that they are right. This plurality of being, you know. For instance, when the Huichol, peyote is at the same time corn and deer. there are three manifestations of the same entity. You know, and I found also when I was working with the Barquinha, one of the churches that use ayahuasca, they also say, you know, that they are the entity can have manifestations in the different mysteries, the mystery of the water, the mystery of the heaven, the mystery of the earth, and so on. So very complex, you know. And thinking about that, you know, in a way, I think that much more sophisticated than we are. I mean, the Western way of looking at things, you know. I mean, how poor, you know, this concept of plant blindness, you know. For most people, you know, think just green or now gray, you know. No idea about where we are. And in indigenous communities, I was reading Descola, he was in a conversation, he was telling, you know, they were asking, he was with the Achuar for several years, and they were asking, did you learn how to hunt? He said, no way, you know, because in order to hunt, you know, the kids already, when they are 12 years old, they already know 300 different birds and how imitate those birds. And a real hunter, it will take it 20 years in order to be able, you know. There is such a deep knowledge about nature. So for one of us, impossible, you know, completely impossible to do. So I see now that our Western civilization, the peak of civilization, I mean, you know, it's just like we have no, you know, we have to go back. And I think that we have to revitalize animism, you know, which is, and animism is not a dogma, it's not a religion, it's not a philosophy, it's simply based on really on sensorial world, you know.
Oh, I love that. Thank you very much. So that brings me to a question about ethnobotanical research. I love what you're saying about engaging with animism as it's just a means of living in the world, and the more you engage with intersubjectivity, the more that's it's not really that refutable. But this clash of epistemologies that we're seeing as you're speaking, I'm thinking about ethnobotanical research can lead to the discovery of new plant species, compounds, biomolecules, which can be used in medicine, agriculture, industry, which puts humans and non-humans at risk of extractionist culture that comes out of Western industrialization. And I'm wondering, as you're expanding these gardens, as you're engaging with kids, as you're educating, but you're also bringing different plants from different places and creating these like intercontinental plant communities. My question is two parts. Two, how do you see your work engaging with protecting those relationships and protecting those communities, human and non-human, from extractionist culture? And second part, I'm on a more personal level, how do the plants that are from different continents engage with one another? And as we're interacting with the subjectivity of plants in these spaces, how do they feel about meeting a cousin that they would never have engaged with otherwise?
Well, the second question I'm also wondering, you know, because sometimes we have a Mexican, you know, side by side with an Australian plant and a Polynesian one, and so on. I just wonder what is happening underneath as well, you know, because of course there is root communication, you know, rhizome and so on. So that I don't know, you know, and there is a question mark, you know, for me as well. Now, of course, one of the problems that we have is reductionism, you know. I mean, let's talk about ayahuasca, you know, Banisteriopsis caapi. Okay, we say Banisteriopsis caapi, one species. Okay, no, there are varieties. Indigenous communities, they recognize many different varieties, different local taxonomies in every place. But some Indians say, okay, these are only a few ones, but then we have many more, and so on. So first, we reduce one species, you know, all this variety, you know, that exists to one species. And then we say, okay, Banisteriopsis caapi has 3 alkaloids, you know, okay. You know, harmine, tetrahydroharmine, you know, harmaline, tetrahydroharmine. There is already a reduction because at least there are many more compounds in the plant, you know. And then we do the other reduction, which is even worse. You know, say, okay, Banisteriopsis caapi, you combine it with Psychointegrator viridis or Diplopterus, and then people are talking about ayahuasca's DMT. And DMT is in the admixture plant. And DMT is not so important among the indigenous communities. The visionary world is okay, fine, but that is not the most important, you know? The most important is the communication, the strength and all that, you know, communication. So in the Western way, we have this reduction into molecules, you know? I know the people in Johns Hopkins and I respect, of course, the work, you know, but I would prefer, if we are talking about a plant, use the plants, you know, look at the other mushrooms, the whole compound. I think that this, look what happened with coca, you know, all the compounds that there is in coca, the way that it's been used traditionally, both in the Andes, in the Amazon, sacred plant, giving you strength, you know, nutrition, being used as offering for the Apus and so on, and it's reduced to cocaine, you know, and look what happened, you know, the tragedy with cocaine, you know. The same with all the plants, coffee, you know, mushroom is psilocybin, you know, and also this reduction is very problematic. And then we have the interaction, you know, the secondary effects and so on. So I will go back and recover, you know, the ancient wisdom, you know, of the indigenous people, and using whole plants, you know, whole plants if possible. You know, and yeah, so you avoid also all this patenting and all that, you know. I have seen terrible things happening with, for instance, with croton in Ecuador. I met the people many years ago with Schultes and Lisa Conte, the director, and all this, you know. So came to Ecuador, extracted, you know, as much as possible the croton species. Not any, the local people could not any longer afford, you know, even to use their own plant, and it was just extracted and, you know, etc. So of course I know that we are 8 billion people. It's very difficult, you know, how to have plans for all, you know, but I think that that's what we should strive towards, you know, go back and recover, you know, the wisdom and the knowledge that we have lost.
I have two questions. One is prompted by your reflection about the sort of gesture towards the medicalization of psychedelics, which I'm sure will be a hot topic at the conference happening tomorrow. You mentioned that, you know, for example, this example with Decola saying, I'd never hunt because I can't actually do hunting the way hunting should be done, right? And I'm thinking about the way that these plants are being extracted from their context and then, you know, marshaled into a clinic, for example, in the West. And I'm curious sort of what maybe people that you work with in the field in these communities would think about that sort of decontextualization. And relatedly, I'm also curious to think about how in vegetalismo, like what is the ontological status of the vision, right? Like is their understanding of vision something that these plants are allowing them to go into another realm of reality? Like what is happening in a vision? Are they accessing reality, truth? Or is it sort of just, you know, as the Western clinical model wants to tell us, a chemical reaction in your brain? What would be their sort of response to that kind of reductionist narrative that's happening with medicalization? That was a very convoluted question. Do you understand? Okay.
Yes. Okay. For the first, when I was with the vegetalistas and so on, trying to get some information about the visions, they didn't talk so much about that. You know, it was not so important. Okay, you can see, well, you know, you can see spirits, you can ask questions, you can see the doctores, they call it, see the doctores, so that the doctores will tell you what plants to use with the patients and so on. But the whole thing about the vision, it was not so important, not the importance that we give in the West, you know, to the vision. And in fact, you know, this globalization of ayahuasca, it was to a great extent through the work of Pablo Maringa, you know, because of the vision, you know, people started to come. But at the same time, it's how to, you know, the way to learn from the plants is that you have to, in a way, you have to be like a plant. You have to purify yourself, the importance of the diet. You know, you are in the forest, you are in isolation, eating very little, just manioc, a little fish, minimum rice, plantains, that's it, you know, no salt, no sugar. And in this way, you are purifying yourself and open to the communications, you know, so that is the way. Of course, you talk about the medicalization of these things. I kind of skeptical. I mean, I know that it can, I mean, there are a lot of people is very positive, you know, but I mean, what the difference? Okay, for the first, I think the community is very important, you know. So many of these treatments, you know, it's just one person, psychologist, doctor, this and that, focusing on one person, sofa, this, you know, it is very expensive, you know. All this attention for one person, you know. All these treatments are extremely expensive, you know this. I think that the community is so very important in this kind of rituals, you know, because it's not only your relationship with the plant, it's our relationship, you know, what we all learn from this and, you know, from each other. So that is a factor. There was something else that I just forgot. The other thing, in the medicalization of these substances, the therapists do not take the substance. I mean, it will be impossible. I mean, forbidden, you know. I mean, there is unthinkable that the ayahuasquero will not take the brew himself, because that is part of the thing, you know. And very often, it is he who has to see what is the problem with the patient. Perhaps not the patient himself, but he will see. So there is there is an immersion, you know, of minds, of emotions, and so on in the ceremonies. Different from this detachment that you find, you know, which is the subject-object thing that we mentioned. You have the therapist and you have the patient there. So I know that it's going to be very difficult, but I'm dreaming of a world in which we are all going to be gardeners. You know, we go back to that. You know, I think that we should, for every machine that we have, we should plant a tree or have a plant. You know, I mean, we are, you know, surrounded by objects. What about being surrounded by subjects? You know, or both. You know, so I think that we need a really tremendous revolution of mind. You know. So I don't know if I also wonder here.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. My question is launching off of what Rachel asked, but also how you responded, Dr. Luna. See how I can phrase this. I think what I'm hearing quite often in psychedelic conversations around how it's used in medical settings is that a tool to be able to then experience, whereas what you're saying and what I understand from the work you've done and others who are working more in relational settings, relational ontologies, is that this is one teacher amongst other teachers who introduces you to other teachers who are non-humans. And I also understand from members of my community a fear of working with such a powerful teacher, and that they won't be able to then, or that they wouldn't be able to, say, engage with an oak tree without the help of a plant that's been labeled a psychedelic, which is complicated anyway. So I'm wondering about when you're working with communities, especially kids, who are doing these incredible paintings of the non-humans that they're seeing, that they're holding in their memory. Like you said, it's not painting, you know, one for one. It's what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. How does it feel, or how do people describe? How can people who aren't working with ayahuasca or don't have access to ayahuasca or other powerful teachers, how can they engage with the plants in their community in a way that's just as deep and intersubjective without relying on necessarily like powerful traditional medicines and access to a shaman, if that makes sense? Do you have anything to add to that? Because I feel like I'm not sure, that was kind of convoluted, but.
No. Well, I think that you don't need those plants, you know, in order to get the communication. You know, I mean, there are indigenous communities that do not use any plants, and still they have this animistic, view. And I see, of course, perhaps I will make a parenthesis. We talk about shamans, vegetalistas, and so on, but we have to think of shamanic communities in which those ideas of plant, the mother of the plants, is all there. So it is in the culture. You don't need to take the plant, and in fact, for most people, I think that you don't need to take ayahuasca. You don't need to take the mushroom. You just need silence, and attention, and the attention to what it is there, And I think that we will get it, But we need to stop the radio, store the input, constant input that we have of advertisement. And I was just 2 days ago in a shopping center, and I was thinking, my goodness, how can we live like that? It is, there's no space for anything, and then you saw the news and all this advertisement all the time. This is really horrible. This is the way to completely stop the communication. Remember, Don Emilio said, he said in Spanish, a los espíritus les aflige el ruido. Spirits are annoyed by the noise. And David Kopanawa, I hope that you have been reading this book, fantastic book, The Falling Sky, he say, that the white people, how can they live with this noise, the noise of their televisions, of the cars, because there is no space for anything. So I think that that's what we need, just simply space, and we will get there, Yeah.
Can I ask one concluding question before? That quote of the noise drives out the spirits. You mentioned so many threats to the communities you're working with. Do they have a sense that these threats are driving out the spirits? That there is an emptying of the rich intersubjective forest life that they have known? Or, what is the resilience of the spirits in the face of these threats?
Yeah, well, David Kopanawa is saying that, that the spirits of the forest is the forest itself. It's not, so that we are losing it. And Don Emilio was saying as well, in the Amazon, in the Peruvian Amazon, it's so very difficult to be in a place where you don't hear a machine. It's just terrible, No, so yes, I think that by destroying nature, we are destroying the spirits of nature, of course. We are getting alone. And this is our tragedy, we already is the only hominid species, We lost the Neanderthals and we lost all the other species, and we're many, And now I was preparing my talk for tomorrow, in the Americas, Abiyala, they said it. The name is instead of America, Abiyala. Many Indians are using this word, 95 to 98% of the population die out within 150 years of contact. The same with the buffaloes, the millions of buffaloes all over North America, 2,000 left, I don't know nowadays it recovered. It's this loss of nature means the loss of the spirits, because spirits of nature is nature itself, so.
Well, we'll do a quick round of applause and then, thank you. And I think for convenience sake, we'll have you ask your question, and we'll repeat it for the people online into the microphone.
Christine, in the back.
Hi, thank you so much. So I was really intrigued by the example of the marmoset monkey who was consuming the sap or the gum of this tree, and I think you said maybe there was DMT and having some maybe psychedelic experience. So I would love, if you have any other details, I would love for you to elaborate on that. But I guess much more broadly, in the communities and cosmologies that you're most familiar with, is this idea of plants as teachers something that refers to teachers for humans or teachers for other animals as well? And then I'm thinking, is there some sort of correspondence between some animals and some plants? Very
Okay.
Thank you, Christine. I'll repeat her question. So, three-part question. First, about the marmosets that were taking plant medicine, and if there were other examples of that. Second, are the plant teachers also, are they only meant to be teachers for humans, or are they teachers to other beings, non-human? And the third part of your question.
Correspondence between certain
All right.
animals.
Correspondences between certain animals and certain plants.
Okay, let's see if I remember. Okay, about the marmosets, you know. We started to see, we planted these anadenanthera, which are not from our ecosystem, they are from the Cerrado. And then suddenly we started to see this marmoset we were worried that they were going to kill the tree. But no, it was okay, they continue. And then suddenly we planted also Jurema, Mimosa tenuiflora, which also contains DMT. And then the marmoset went for that one. And then we have, so that we realized they were all going to the DMT containing plants. I don't know what they are getting from that. They look quite active, they come in the morning and look active. Now I cannot be sure, of course, that they are really getting high or no.
Did they join your painting school?
Yeah. So the other thing is that I think that we are not the center, we think, are they teaching to us? Of course, the whole nature is in communication. They are all teaching each other. I remember once walking in London with Rupert Sheldrake, he lives very big park and all, and he said, nature is putting all this beauty and colors for each other. It's not for us. It's just like, there is a constant communication between everything there. So they are not only talking to us, they are talking to each other, of course, And so what was the third one? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that I have an example. Thinking about what is the limit? What is the limit? We said, David Bohm said, there's really no thing, because everything is in flux, So once we had a poet, Mauricio Tolosa, who was a resident in Wasiwaska. He was there 6 months, wrote a beautiful book called Mi Maestro el Manzano, my teacher, the apple tree. And so, like Mi Maestro, the octopus, and so on, so. And so we had a wall, a stone wall with the Oliluki, Ribea corimbosa covering. And then when it flowers, the whole wall is 30 meters of white flowers. And he heard one morning a noise. He came out and it was just, he saw there were hummingbirds, tiny hummingbirds, choom, 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 but moving too fast to see, So observing again and again, realized, no, it was not a hummingbird. It's a moth, which looks like a hummingbird, tiny little one, choom, choom, choom. And then it comes just before sunrise for about 20 minutes, and they go, and then come bees and other insects come, so they take turns, So I was thinking, Ribea corimbosa, what is the limit? But the scent that's sending out is not part of the plant itself? And what about those moths, It's not also part of the plant, because without those, the plant will not exist, because they need for pollination. So suddenly, realize that everything is in communication, and it is only our Western mind that define it. This is this, the idea of species, If everything is in flux, we put names to things that are changing. At some point, they are changing. We say, this is this, but it changes into something else, So I think that we have, in this respect, I think thinking about the Greeks, Plato and Aristotle. We have forgotten Heraclitus, Pantarei. Everything is in flow. I think that and I also like Whitehead's process philosophy and all this. I think that we have to go back into this kind of because it's more interrelationship. It's not separation. It is all moving into each other. Yeah.
More questions?
Dan?
Yes, one challenge that I've been very concerned about and wondering how to overcome is for the large percentage of people, particularly in the West, who've lived for 10, 20 generations with this objective world, with this world of where we are told this is how it is, this world that serves capitalism. How do we, I agree with you completely on the what. What's the how to bring this society into a better relationship?
Dan asked how do we bring society into a better relationship?
Thank you. Well, you know, with Christine Hauskeller, we have this group in Exeter University, and we are thinking about decolonization. And I think that we need to decolonize our minds, you know, because all of us, you know, we say the West, but our ancestors, all the Western, you know, your ancestors and my ancestors and all the ancestors, we were all animists. You know, if you go back, you know, it doesn't matter what country in Europe you are from, you know, at the end you have, you know, this process of deanimation, you know, or you know, it has been a process as well. It's a disease, you know, I don't know when you started, you know, some people say that it started in summer, you know, or when, I mean, who knows, you know. So first of all, we have to be aware, be conscious that we need to overcome this kind of, you know, I mean, the only thing is awareness, I think, you know, and then give ourselves the opportunity to get in touch with these other things, you know. So I will say, you know, you don't need to go to the forest, you know. You can communicate with the grass, it's outside your door, you know. I mean, it's all there, you know. It's just a question of paying attention, that's all, you know, paying attention. And of course, it's difficult because we don't pay attention. So, yeah.
Go for it.
So I guess, you know, in the Western context, like when we talk about teaching and learning, it's a very like human to human verbal process. So when we're talking about teaching and learning from plants, like what kind of form or experience does that take? Is it like insight from close paying attention? Is it like a feeling you get when you ingest a plant, or like, you know, what kinds of, like, I think people, in order to reanimate, there's kind of a need for like understanding other forms of learning. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Question was on forms of learning.
Okay. Well, you remind me of something that I didn't say. Many of the people that I was working with, and David Copanao and other dreams, you know, there is a communication. One of the communications is through dream. Monica Galliano, you know her work, you know, she learned about Curupita guianensis, the cannonball tree. You know, she got the idea. In fact, I think that he got the idea of her experiments with Mosa pudica through the cannonball tree. You know, so and David Copanao, he complains white people don't know how to dream. You know, and in fact, the whole Western world, you know, we kill our dreams. You know, the first thing, you know, first you put an alarm clock, boom, destroy everything. You know? Then you take a coffee, bam, gone. Everything is gone. You know, there is no information there left. You know, and while the other societies like the Australian Aboriginal, very important. You know, the dream world. You know, so in the morning, silence and just think what happened, what was there, what is the message, you know, what is, you know, because it's another channel of information. The Macuna in Colombia, they said that these are two ways of mind, two minds, you know, the mind during the day, the mind during the night. And so there is something, it's another lack we have in the West, you know. We don't pay attention to half of our lives, you know, which happens in this other side. And dreams and visions go hand in hand, and probably maybe even physiological as well. I don't know if you have read this article by James Callaway, who posed that the possibility that the 5 periods that we have of REM sleep, perhaps it is related to internal endogenous DMT. You know, could be. You know. We don't know what is the mechanism, but it may happen, you know, that it may happen that we are all shamans at night. We only don't remember. We don't remember. Yeah.
a great book title. We are all shamans at night. Keep that. I just want to briefly comment quickly on two things you said. One is that we're very interested in this initiative to recover strains in the Western philosophical and intellectual tradition that are more animistic, because I think there's this risk that when people start to have a more intersubjective experience with plants, they think to themselves, if they're from Western traditions like I am, there's no room for that here, so I'll look to a tradition that is not mine in order to do that. So I love what you're saying and invoking people like Whitehead. We've been exploring Hildegard von Bingen. You can explore Spinoza. There's so many people who've been lost in this thought that I think we need to go back to go forward. And I forgot my second thought, so I'm just going to read. Oh, I remember. Yes, so we read Monica Gagliano's book, Thus Spoke the Plant, last year. And yeah, my understanding is that actually cost her a bit in terms of her career. I could be wrong. And going on the record saying, you know, my scientific experiments were informed by my plants. Like, my plants told me how to design these experiments. So I'm really curious, and I hope there are more scientists who are willing to put their career at risk a little bit in order to have these intersubjective experiences and learn from plants directly. Before we go back to this audience, I have two questions here from Zoom. The anthropologist Gerardo Reichel Domotov did some wonderful studies with the Dasana. Could you speak to their wonderful worldview of spirit guardians, masters of plants, and masters of animals? And the second is going to be, thanks for all you've done. I'm so moved to hear about your Amazon painting school. Would you tell a little bit about your experience with the Sangoma? Okay. So those are the two that we have from Zoom here.
Okay, first about Gerardo Reichel Dolmatov, Austrian Colombian. He was we call it the father of Colombian anthropology and archaeology, but he never studied neither anthropology or archaeology. He was a classical man. I was lucky. I met him twice. You know, in fact, he was very important to me because when I was in Berkeley, I read Amazonian Cosmos. And who is the first time an anthropologist points out the importance of Capi, Banisteroso Capi, you know, in indigenous communities. And then I wrote him. It was in 1973. I wrote him a letter. I don't know what I wrote, but anyway, he wrote me. You know, in a way, it was Carlos Castañeda's time. You know, the teachers of the Huari. He said, "I recommend you to study biology." Botany, you know, is hard science first before you get into anthropology, not to get lost, you know. So he was, and I follow, you know, I went to Oslo University. I spent some time studying mathematics and chemistry. I forgot all of it, you know. But anyway, I hope that it somehow molded my mind in order to be more careful with that, you know. But anyway, yeah, Rachel Domatov was very important, because he's the first one, I think, you know, they pointed out to the philosophy of Amerindians, you know, how the depth of their thoughts, you know, their relation, you know, how they have this idea of flow. In fact, when I saw this film, what's called oh my goodness, this film about the other world and. Avatar, you know, Avatar. I was remember when I looked at Avatar, he said, "Oh my God, Cameron, he must have read this article by Reichel Dolmatov, you know, because and in fact, this tree, you know, it's ayahuasca. You know, I was talking to one of the people who put money into this film, a Pakistani man. He said, yes, you know, it seemed that there was, you know, the inspiration of this was there, you know. So. Very important film, you know. The first one, the second one I didn't like so much, but the first one, you know, is the same like Matrix. You know, the first one was fantastic. The second one's there. Okay, so anyway, so yes, very important. And and then what was the second? The Sangoma. Okay, I can tell you a little story about the Sangoma. You know, Dave Millar, this naturalist, he took me to the Sangoma Valley. I was visiting the Russell's Valley, you know, giving some talks there, and I, at the time, many years ago, I took ayahuasca with me, and then I had a little group took ayahuasca there, and then I was visiting the Sangoma, and And Dale introduced me to this wonderful woman, Zulu woman, called Monica. And I told Monica, you know, that I have this brew from the Amazon, and almost before I finished the sentence, I said, you mean that I will be able to see the spirits and ask them how to heal my patients? I mean, it was just immediate. And then he just said, well, that's what they say. I am interested. Okay, so we had a session with a few people, and I was nervous, you know, because, I mean, how much to give, you know, a person who has never, and then I saw her walk into, it was outside, to a very primitive bathroom, and she at some point almost lost balance, and I came to help her, and she said, don't touch me. I know you want to cut my body into pieces, and you want to take my head and sell it abroad for thousands of rands. So, I mean, I was calm, and she went back several times. And then in the morning, I always have a sharing, and she said, my grandmother came to me last night, and she told me that this is good muti, medicine, because you die with it, but you come to life again. Exactly the shamanic motif, you know, dismembration, and then, you know, and coming to life again. So, I mean, I met several sangomas there, you know. Pity I didn't have the time. I wish that I was able to spend time there. By the way, the Sangoma Valley, it was a place where sangomas from all over South Africa went there. They live in caves, and they have to wait there to get in touch with their ancestors, and only when their ancestors will give them permission, they will be able to go to the city or to where they live, and to be healers. So sometimes they will spend 2 years, 3 years there. They were taking all sorts of medicine, some of them probably psychoactive as well, or at least mildly psychoactive and so on. Okay, very important place. Okay, it belongs to some South African guy who sent them out. All the sangomas, because it's private property. I mean, a traditional place, you know, the sacred Sangoma Valley, you know, belongs to some guy who didn't want to have these blacks there, and out. So I don't know. I mean, I hope I have to try to get in touch with somebody to see if it is possible to buy that land back and give it to the sangomas, you know, yeah. Because it's such a horrible thing, you know, that happens, you know. So yeah.
Questions from the audience? Do you have a question, Rich?
Sure. There are little font questions. Okay. So I'll ask this one first. We have talked about subject-subject relationships in learning from plants. Are there time and space dimensions from learning from plants? On what realm of time and space do plants operate? And do we share that, maybe as a gloss on that question?
Well, that's a difficult question, time and space, you know. Because when you are there, the normal time doesn't work, you know. I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, we are in a group in a ceremony, and people say, you know, time seems to slow down, and a lot of times people agree, you know, it is like, or other times it's just, it went too fast. Time and space work in completely different ways. I've been wondering, I even wrote an article, you know, I have this ayahuasca reader, it's an anthology, and I wrote a chapter for that, and I'm wondering about space, you know, because you see a space, of course, but now you cannot measure that space, you know. You can, you know, and the space you can see through different, you know, different spaces, you know. So, and I was wondering, this is kind of perhaps silly, you know, but I was thinking of Descartes, you know, who divided everything into rex cogitans, rex extensa, which you measure. And I think that there is something in between, which I call it res fantastica, to call it something, you know, in which there is some kind of time space, but it is not this physical space that you can measure, and it's not this physical time, but there is something else, which is probably, like Benny Shannon used to say in Antipodes of the Mind, this is a beautiful book about the phenomenology of ayahuasca, which is a co-creation. There is something out there which we don't know what it is, and it's something in there which we don't know what it is either, and there is some kind of interface of this. So this time and space probably is the interface with something which is in us and something which is out there, and what it is, you know, it depends on our ontologies, you know, who knows what it is. So.
Oh, let's take these first. Jeff, why don't you?
Yeah, thank you for the amazing talk. I have a question about animism. It's sort of extended beyond the living world and into maybe the machine or the human created or what we would normally truly view as inanimate. And to tie the question to my interest in psychedelics and specifically synthetic psychedelics, I think there are a lot of people who would say those are teachers and beings in a way, despite their creation in the lab. And I'm curious if, in your opinion or the cosmologies of the people you work with, there's space for that as well.
So the question to restate it is there room within the traditions that you know and work with for affording agency or life to the non-biotic? So created things, synthetic molecules, stones, etc.
Okay, many indigenous people, it's not only the biotic, it's also lakes, rivers, mountains, you know. You have read probably Robin Wall Kimmerer, you know, her book. And she makes this beautiful observation about the language in her native language, or the language of her parents, because she didn't grow up with her language, you know, with English, you know, and she has been learning it. And she was pointed out how in the language of her ancestors, something like 70%, I think, of the language are verbs. The opposite in English, which are objects, you know. So if you have verbs, if you have a language in which much of the words are verbs, verb means it implies agency. You have somebody who is doing something. It's a completely different way. So beach is not the beach. Beach is also the waves, the sand, the rocks that are, you know, all this is, you know, so the agency is everywhere, in everything, not only what is alive for us, but it's everywhere. So, and of course, and then you can say the Gaia, you know, the planet itself, the galaxy itself, you know. Rupert Shelley has beautiful talk about, is the sun conscious, you know. And so I think that many of the indigenous societies will not really differentiate. Everything is alive. Who is in Hallowell, I think, who was the stone? Yes, are all stones living? Some are, and sometimes they are, but not all the time. You know, perhaps when you put attention, they are alive. But when you don't pay attention to them, they are not living. You know, so. And about the, you know, the new molecules and all this, you know, okay, well, I mean, I agree, you know. I remember once I took pharmawaska, you know, just to try to see with it, harmine and DMT together, you know. Okay, yes, you got sick. They said, you know, you will not get sick. Yes, I got sick. And you saw visions. Yes, I saw. Not the same. I mean, it has not the quality of the plant, you know. So I prefer always plants, you know, living organisms, you know, in a way, you know. I prefer that. Okay, synthetics, you know, yes, but look again. I will repeat, you know, what happened with coca, what happened with tobacco, you know, cigarettes, you know, with 3,000-4,000 chemicals there, only a little bit of nicotine by itself. I mean, the tobacco is used by the American Indians. It doesn't do anything. I mean, my grandmother smoked tobacco, you know. She died 103 years old, you know. I mean, you know, if I get there, I'm happy, you know. So that is my own feeling, you know. I think that that is the problem, that we cosify, we make things, and the moment it's a new molecule, you get patent, you can make money out of it, you objectify, and it becomes an object, not a subject, So I'm skeptical myself, but of course people can do whatever. By the way, I'll tell you something that I came via Sao Paulo, and there was, with artificial intelligence, they are doing all sort of visionary art, all this, and of course it's very impressive, And I was watching one of them, a Brazilian artist, it's just Pablo Maringo, and, it's just the same thing, Yeah. So this little school that we created, have its ramifications. It's all over. In fact, Pablo had a very big influence in other artists, in the Western world. But anyway, so.
You had a question here?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm new to this subject, so thank you very much for the introduction. I hope my question isn't naive. I've read another book by a person called Diana Beresford Kruger.
Excuse me?
Diana Beresford Kruger, The Wisdom of Trees, or To Speak of the Trees. And she seems to take a more Celtic approach to looking at the animist or tradition of Europe, let's say.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your face and I'm thinking, maybe you were to answer this question, but I was just wondering if there's any overlap between her thinking and your own. But if you're not familiar, then
no, I'm not familiar. But I think that if we go back, you have read probably Maria Gimbutas, of course, when she's writing about how the Teutonic or the Germans were going into what is today in Latvia, the Baltic countries, say they believe in the sun and the moon and the Germans came with the true faith. They had been already lost their faith, through the Franks and so on. So there's this process of the animation of Europe, which happened, within 400 or 500 years. In fact, even today, if you go to the Sami people in northern Norway, there are still some, most of them they are Christian, but some of them still keep their old religion. And I think that if we go back enough, it's just the same. I mean, in a way, I think that we are animistic, at heart, really. In fact, all children are animistic, until it comes to the time which tell them Santa Claus doesn't exist. There are no mermaids, there are no fairies, and I'm sure that we all went through some kind of trauma that we forgot when we are told it's not true, we have been lied all, So I think that, in fact, I have to say something. Now they are talking so much about animism here and there, I see that there is a response. I think that we feel somehow that this is true, especially giving talks to young people. Suddenly, you see, that you're touching something there in which I think that we all agree somehow that we have missed it, somehow in the so-called civilizatory project, we lost that. Weber, he called it the what is called the disenchantment of the world. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Comments on that really quickly. One thing that reminds me of that our community has talked about is of the many things that aren't great about social media. One thing that's been really beautiful to watch has been young people who are regularly engaging with videos or content that depicts or shows non-humans behaving in unexpected ways. Mm-hmm. And it becomes more and more difficult to tell a young person that an animal is not conscious or non-human isn't capable of empathy or isn't capable of deep relationship and community when they are inundated with material that shows otherwise. And traditionally that's been thought of as anecdotal science, so it's not taken seriously in research communities. It has to be done in a lab in a specific setting that's hyper-controlled, where an animal's not going to behave naturally, not going to have a relationship with the researcher, or has a very complicated relationship with the researcher. And so I think it's, as you're saying with young people, that's one of the things that I'm excited about, is seeing this pushback and saying, no, there's actually tons of content and material that shows that this is otherwise. And the second thing I wanted to say was actually about Celtic studies. There's quite a lot of material on the animist relationships, the intersubjective relationships. And one thing just to look for, if this is something of interest to you, is there's a beautiful book called Celtic Nature Poetry that has, that was the translator Jackson, his last name's Jackson. He has a piece from the 11th century where the poet Swivna, who's this prophet madman, he's up in a tree and he's speaking to all of these plants and other non-humans who are in his glen that he loves, and he uses the vocative and the diminutive to speak to them. So even in the grammar of the language he's using, he's expressing this deep love, deep intersubjectivity, and deep respect as well. So to say that, yeah, it's totally there. It's just a matter of searching for it. Any other questions from the audience?
I have a question, thinking about Carl Jung a little bit, and you were talking about dreams and the importance of dreams. We're actually talking about dreams on our drive here. I'm thinking about sort of the core animus that we're talking about, and how maybe all universal, it's a universal human experience. So from that, thinking about universal symbols and what you think of that, as far as, it's pretty controversial. I think there's some heavy opinions in that regard, but I'm curious what you think about it.
So to reiterate the question, it was around Carl Jung and dreams and universal symbols and how that resonates.
Well, it's difficult for me to say. I don't know Jung well enough, to say that really these archetypes are what is called are really universal and so on. I don't know. I just wonder, but there's a question mark for me. I cannot really, say that it is a fact. But when you were talking about, I was thinking of this book. I don't remember the author. Is the Dutch primatologist. Are we smart enough to know how smart animals are? And in fact, now I'm reading, as much as I can, the world of animals, the world of fish, how the birds think, how the bees think. There's a lot of literature. And in fact, I see that the distance between science and animism, is getting closer. The gap is being closed, in a way, we were animistic, then came religion, then criticizing animism, and then came philosophy, criticizing religion, and then science, criticizing philosophy. Now science is coming back, And so it's a circle.
Yeah, what you just said gave me the courage to ask my question, which is, do you feel that the decline of animism happens with the idea of God, and particular with the monotheistic God? And in the cultures that you study, like I know Maria Sabina somehow managed to merge Christianity and psychedelic consciousness, but I'm wondering, in the cultures that you study, what's the relationship to Western religion, if any?
You want to repeat it, the question?
Sure. So the question is about the role of monotheism in the criticism or perhaps decline of animist ontologies and relational existence with non-humans.
Okay, two thoughts. Don Emilio, my teacher, he always begins the session addressing Christ, Divino Cristo. You should see my film. It's in YouTube. Don Emilio and His Little Doctors. My name is a 27-minute film. He always begins with that. But once that is done, then we are not any longer. It's the world of spirits. It's just at the beginning. When I was doing Don Basilio Gordon, I was with a Shipibo. I spent a month doing the diet myself, taking ayahuasca with him. And I was recording. He didn't talk much, but I was recording. Every time he wanted to talk, I just pressed the button. And then once I was surprised that please don't record this. Don't record, okay? What he said, it was a prayer, a Catholic prayer, but he didn't want to have it on tape. So in a way, you know, I don't know what it was in his mind, you know, but I don't know whether he didn't want me to, that they will know that he also did it or not. But even when I was in the Sangoma Valley, many of them were Christians as well, doing the ritual. So I think that what I think myself, you know, is that animism can coexist perfectly well with any religion, you know. In fact, if we get into animism, you know, who is going to quarrel with you? The problem, of course, is the book, the dogma. That's the big problem, I think. Monotheistic, when it is crystallized in such a way that here is the truth and nothing else, you know, that this, you know. I think that they coexist. And even some of the Indians, they talk about the big spirit, you know, North American, the big spirit, but also the other spirits, you know. So I don't think that there is a contradiction, really, you know. But of course, I myself have my qualms about Christianity, certain aspects of Christianity, you know, so, because I know what happened in the Americas, you know, with Christianity. You know. So.
There's a really wonderful book by Mark Wallace called When God Was a Bird that explores animism and Christianity, and he has two really incredible points. One of them is that there's more references to God as a rock than as anything else in the text, and the second is how many, for every story of a garden or of a grove being bulldozed in processes of colonization, there are just as many stories of saints hiding in trees that they deeply love, or monks and their relationships to trees. So I think it's a deeply complex and hard to untangle and very culturally specific question. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Rachel, I'm going to pass the mic to you, and then we'll close it out.
Sure. I would love to end by reflecting on these paintings. I'm sitting with a tension in something you said. You said when you asked a person you worked with about the visions, the response was the visions don't really matter, right? It's the information that I received and the healing that this doctor was administering. I'm just curious, what does it mean to paint these visions? Like, why paint these visions? I'm thinking in the study of religion, we often have this archetype of the prophet who receives a vision, and there's some sort of carrying out or a culmination of that vision, often by sharing. But it sounds like that's not necessarily what's happening here. So what does it mean to paint these visions and share them with the world? What does it mean to the people doing it? What does it mean to you? Is there a tension there in having these experiences and then kind of reifying them and sharing them through painting?
Okay, for the first, we have to think that indigenous art, you know, which is there is a lot of meaning there, you know, like in the Maloka and the body painting, you know, face painting of the Siona and other people. These are also from the visionary world. You know? The visions that we have now today, in a way, it was Pablo Amaringo, you know, who started all this. And I remember we started from zero, you know, with very little money, and I used to make photocopies of the paintings and selling for cheap money to local people. But the thing is that it was immediately recognition that it was the ayahuasca world. You know, people saw it. Oh, that's ayahuasca. Nobody had thought to do it, but when it was done, then okay, it is possible to do that. Even Pablo told me, I never did it because I thought nobody would be interested in this, you know. And then it was that what, you know, made him famous, you know, his visions. So I think that there was nobody was interested in that, you know. And suddenly now, more and more. So perhaps I was exaggerating that people do not pay attention, don't talk about visions, they don't talk. Perhaps it's more private, I don't know. It's like these are messages that you get and you don't need to talk about that, you know. Perhaps you know. The thing is that in the Western world, if something happens to you, you have to tell it immediately, you know, or with dreams, you know, and they say, don't tell your dream, don't tell it, because then it will not work, you know. So I don't know, perhaps it's something like that, you know. I don't know. Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you at future events. Thank you, Luis Eduardo, and please join the conference tomorrow.
And thank you to everyone on Zoom as well.
Sponsor, Center for the Study of World Religions.
Copyright 2024, the President and Fellows of Harvard